Well, it's IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling along with Jesse Stiers and his silky, satiny, shiny Dallas Cowboys hat. I'm Sean Stiers. That looks smooth. Where'd you get that?
I found it on the internet. I can't remember where, but it was like on sale for $20, so I had to buy
Nice.
it.
Very nice. Vince and I were talking last night about, I saw the new Mission Impossible over the weekend. Vince wants to go see Indiana Jones. He didn't sound as thrilled about Mission Impossible. If I posed it to you, would you take one over the other? Like which would you rather see?
Mission Impossible, and what's the other one?
Indiana Jones.
See, I never really got into either, but I guess I would say I would be more interested in Mission Impossible.
Yeah, I found it pretty entertaining. I don't. I mean, I think I've seen all but maybe one Indiana Jones. The first one I still think is the best one, and the second one was not very good. There've been some okay ones since then, but I'd go see it. It's just a little long. Mission Impossible is a little long, like we talked about last night, but there's a lot of action in it, as you would expect from Mission Impossible. It goes very quickly, so I don't know. I haven't really heard the Indiana Jones side. Is it a quick 2.5 hours or 240 or whatever it happens to be? But yeah, I just noticed you're Dallased out from head to toe. You got both the hat and the T-shirt today. Are you sending a message to somebody?
No messages. I'm just getting excited. I've had this shirt on today, and I've been running behind. I've been working all day up until 6 o'clock. And so then I realized that I didn't have time to change and my hair looked really bad. So I decided to put a hat on, and this is the one that was going to match kind of what I got going on today.
Yeah. All right. I like it. I like it. I like where your head's at. Derek says Mission Impossible. Who wants to watch Jay Peterman with the whip? Suspect. Jay Peterman with a whip. That's Harrison. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Rules changes is that's what we're going to talk about today. What college football rule would you change? We've got plenty of Notre Dame stuff coming up in rapid fire. Some Marcus Freeman stuff, some Brian Kelly gap closing stuff. We've got that coming up a little bit later. I saw someone tweet the other day, what would you change about college football? And a lot of different replies. We've got some suggestions coming in here. Right off the top, the one that I saw the most was the targeting rule. What do you think about the current college targeting rule, and what would you do with it, Jesse? Do you think it needs to be changed? If so, how would you reconfigure the targeting rule in college football?
Yeah, so the targeting rule to me, penalties in college football, because I don't think it's called in a fair enough and consistent manner.
That's pretty much every college football penalty is not called consistently enough.
Yeah, but I guess what makes it the magnitude greater for this one is it has an impact on players.
Big impact. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like the potential to, be suspended an entire half, that's large implications, especially for, maybe it's your best defensive player, maybe it's your best linebacker, maybe it's your best, secondary player. I think that there should be, because what is the current rule right now? Like if you get two in a game, you get an automatic, or no, if you get one in a game.
Current rule, if you're flagged for targeting, you're ejected immediately, and
right.
it is for whatever half you're playing in plus the next half. So like if you're ejected in the first half, you're just ejected for the rest of the game. If you're ejected in the second half, you're also ejected for the first half of the following game. But it is immediate ejection if you are deemed to have targeted the opposing player.
Yeah, so my amendment to the rule would be incidental targeting. I think you should get a warning, and then after that, your second offense in the same game, I think that's when you should start to get the ejections. And I do still think, though, that if there is malicious intent, like but that's the thing, is you can't come up with vague rules, because then you have to interpret what's malicious and what's not malicious.
Yeah.
But I think that in order to solve this, there should be a warning at first, and then the second offense should get you the final ejection. I think there's too much writing on the line, and there's too much interpretation of the rule at the college level, that a 15-yard penalty should be assessed on the first one, and then the second one you should get kicked out. You should essentially get a warning before getting an ejection, in my opinion.
And that's a big part of, like, there's so much, like, every flag that's thrown is subjective anyway. But when it comes to this particular penalty, the targeting penalty, there is so much subjectivity from one official to the next, I think. Who happens to be replaying it, who happens to have thrown the flag initially, from, one incident to the next. It is not cut and dry. Like in the NFL, NFL officials still make mistakes, but by and large, you don't see a lot of, like once it goes to instant replay, it seems relatively cut and dry. Either it is or it is, and again, like there's no targeting in the NFL. I'm just saying, once a play goes to replay in the NFL, there's a lot less arguing after the fact, I think. Either replay holds it up or it doesn't. Now there are obviously still some times where you go, well, was that a catch? Was that not a catch? Can they overturn it based on what you're seeing? But I agree with what you're saying with the targeting. The automatic ejection just seems too severe because of the fact that it's so uneven, so inconsistent with the way that it's called. I think, first offense for a player in a game, it's a 15-yard penalty. It's a personal foul, just like any personal foul. And like Ty is saying, treat it like a yellow card, red card system similar to soccer. And I think that's kind of what he's getting at, and kind of what you said. First offense is just a 15-yard penalty. Second offense, then you're ejected. Like now, there's something on, you're going to, steer more clear of it. I think, I just think it makes too much sense. They've tried to tweak this a little bit over the last couple of years, but I still think there's too much open to interpretation. Like sometimes you see, what appears to be, a defender hitting a shoulder first, and then his helmet ends up, into the helmet of the player that he's tackling after the initial contact was, like around the shoulder. And then but it still ends up being called for targeting. I think it's too severe the way they're calling it right now to have the ejection, on the first instance. I think it needs to be second instance in a game. Or you could even say, go back to the last game if you want. Like if you're going to say, just kind of tweaking it a little bit. If you have a targeting in consecutive halves, then you're also ejected for the next half. Something like that. But I think it needs to be on the second one, not the first one.
Yeah, and it's the NFL seems to do it right? Like the first one you get 15, and then the second you get 15 in ejection. It's just, you would like to see similar rules across the board. I think that's kind of the frustrating part. Is, I understand that certain rules make sense in college compared to NFL, like the wider hash marks and stuff like that. But there's certain rules to me that need to carry over from college to NFL to allow for a better transition and just smoother overall gameplay, in my opinion, as well.
Right. Ty says he would change the fair catch rules on kickoffs, whether it's fair caught inside the 25-yard line only. You get the ball at that spot plus 5 yards, but the furthest you can go is the 25-yard line. I don't think you'd see very many fair catches. I think that, and I'll let you kind of talk about this as someone who's played much more recently, Jesse. I think the reason that they went to this fair catch is to incentivize teams to make a fair catch so they can get it at the 25, because they were trying to eliminate hits. I get what Ty is saying. Like, obviously if you fair catch it inside the 5 and then you're going to go out to the 25-yard line, that's a pretty big bonus. What do you think of the fair catch rule and the tweak that Ty's talking about here?
So I changed the fair catch rule wherever it's caught inside the 25 line only. you get the ball at that spot plus 5 yards, but the furthest you can go is the 25-yard line. So to me, I don't necessarily have too much of the issue with the kickoff and the fair catch situation. I think that because the thing is if you fair catch it, you automatically get it to 25. And obviously what they're trying to do is reduce the impact of, serious plays on kickoff. Yeah. I don't really mind it too much, to be honest with you. So I don't I like the idea, but I don't have an opposition to the current rule as is. How about you?
Yeah, I don't either, because of what you said. The fact that they're trying to cut down on those collisions on kickoffs, and that's the only reason they went to this fair catch rule, is try to incentivize teams making the fair catch to cut down on the collisions. So it's like, well, you make the fair catch regardless of where it is, you're going to get it at the 25-yard line.
Right.
Targeting is my number one. We just talked about it, but that is the number one I would change. Number two for college football, and these are really my big two, and I'm can kind of go either way on a lot of different ones, but if our listeners have suggestions, obviously feel free to shoot them at us. We've got a few more, but the instant replay challenge system in college, really there is no true challenge system for a coach. Like, you can call timeout and tell the official, hey, you need to look at that or whatever, but that's it. I don't understand why this is so complicated for college. Like, why every single play is up for review. Why can't they just, because they talk about cutting down on time of the game and all that stuff, and they've already changed rules of the game now with letting the clock run after the spot of the ball on a first down. All these instant replays in college football, when any play is subject to review, is just infuriating. Just go to the NFL challenge system. Coaches get 2 challenges a game. If they fail a challenge, they lose a timeout. If he successfully challenges, no timeout is charged. And then in the final 2 minutes of the game, it automatically goes to the booth, so you don't have to worry about, using a challenge. And obviously every scoring play goes up for review as well. I don't get it. I don't understand, and obviously you throw the, your red flag if you want to challenge. I don't understand why college doesn't go to that. Do you like the college challenge system, or should they just go to what the NFL has already shown is a pretty good system?
So for me, the amendments I would make to the college football replay system is, I think all the 3 plays that should be reviewed no matter what, in my opinion, or there's someone kind of constantly always watching, are touchdowns, first downs, and change of possession. I think that those 3 should always be looked at no matter what. And then after that,
I've got no problem with that.
After that, I feel like I would go to exactly what you're saying. Each coach,
you get 2 challenges.
I'm going to go 3 challenges though. I think in college you should get one more. And then if you do, successfully use a challenge, you retain it. And then if it's non-successful, then you lose a timeout after that. But I think that college coaches should get one more challenge than the NFL. And then, like I said, every touchdown, first down, and change of possession should be reviewed on its own, essentially.
Yeah. And that's still going to be a lot of potential, stopping down and looking at things. Because again, just being honest, the college replay officials are not as good as the NFL replay officials, almost by, it's just nature that's going to happen, because you have so many more games on TV. You have to have more replay officials in college, which is also why you shouldn't be relying on them to go back and take a look, and you shouldn't have to take a look at every close play. Is it a catch? Was it not a catch? Is he inbounds? Is it not inbounds? Make the coach have to challenge that. Why is college basically giving every coach a failsafe for all that stuff? Just use it. And if you want to make it 3 instead of 2, like you talked about, I've got no problem with that. But I think they need an actual challenge system in college football. that's at least similar to what they're using in the NFL.
Hey,
What about a 2-minute warning? This is one that I saw suggested. Create a 2-minute warning, and now listen for just a second. Let me lay out my case. I've been opposed to it. I don't think that you need it. I mean, basically, the 2-minute warning was created to give network TV a free commercial break. Like especially if it's a close game at the end of the game. It's boom, you're at the 2-minute warning now. Because with this new clock rule that's coming in this year, at the end of each half, they're going to. Okay, so let me go back first. As I was, what are you looking at, by the way?
my other screen with notes on it.
You have like a map over there or something. So they're going on first downs. They're going to spot the ball, and the clock is going to keep running. It's not going to be like what we've been used to in college football, where the clock stops, after a first down. So it's going to keep moving. But in the last 2 minutes of each half, you're going to have a running clock like it used to be. Basically, they're going to revert back to the old system to kind of speed things a little bit. So for that reason, since the rules are going to change on the field at the end of each half, with under 2 minutes to go, it kind of makes sense for college football to have a 2-minute warning now, because there's actually, the rule is going to change on the field. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, because there's going to be less stoppage of time. And so that's essentially why the NFL has a 2-minute warning, is because it's just an extra free timeout before the end of, the second quarter and the fourth quarter. And if you're eliminating, the stoppage of clock after first downs and etc., I have no problem adding a 2-minute warning. I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't I'm not like upset if it doesn't change, essentially. Like it would be a nice added bonus, considering all of the extra stoppage that's going to be out now, or I guess removed from the game. And so it logically makes sense to add some sort of 2-minute warning. And again, I like the transition of rules. So if you're going to, start to convert to more of like an NFL style with some of these rules, I think that you should also get the benefits of the NFL rules that they're following, aka add a 2-minute warning.
Yeah, that's what, like I said, in general, I have been opposed to college football going to a 2-minute warning, but because of the fact that they're changing the rules, and Tyler's saying get rid of the stoppage on first downs, they are. They are changing that as of this year. There's not going to be, they stop it just long enough to spot the ball. As soon as they spot the ball, the clock is running once again. So it's going to be different. They are going to be doing it a little bit differently. Irish Gordian Knot says, why don't we have chips in balls so you can get higher level stats about ball throw speed, rotations, overall distance traveled, etc. Also would be able to sense if it hits the ground.
So this is a big one that I've been, saying needs to happen for a long time. And it's exactly this reason. There's too many, and especially watching, and this goes to the NFL, college, whatever level you want to watch, there's so many games where it's just almost a guess where that ball stops in terms of breaking the plane of the first down or the goal line. And essentially what you can do is create like a laser between, with the first down line. And if the chip in the ball crosses it at any time, well, you've gained a first down or you've crossed the goal line, right? And you've seen, like, a prime example is Ohio State and Michigan, whatever year that was, on the quarterback sneak, and everyone was in an uproar about whether or not he got the first down or not. That to me is an easy one. I swear every year it happens to the Cowboys in the NFL, where Dak is trying to, get a first down across the goal line, and it looks clear and obvious that he's crossed it, but somehow he's come up short. So I like this idea, and it's also it's introduced stuff that I haven't considered before, aka like the spin rotation, being able to sense whether or not it hit the ground or not. And I think that's important too, with not only catches in regulation, but when the ball hits out of bounds and when the clock should stop, based on when the ball, hits out of bounds, essentially.
From what I understand, there are already chips in NFL balls. They're just not using it like for any practical purpose, that we can see on TV right now. I think they're gathering data basically, to kind of see whatever, like I think they're kind of checking some of this stuff, gathering data, seeing, how accurate it is, how successful it is, all this different stuff. I think we're getting closer to that, but they're just not there quite yet. I don't know if there are chips in college ball, like in stuff like the speed rotation and stuff like that. I think a lot of that stuff is being done as well. It's just that it's not being shared with any of us because that's all, like analytical data, just like spin rate with a baseball pitcher and all that, launch angle and all those different things. I think some of that is being collected by the individual teams. It's just that we don't, get to see very much of that yet.
Right.
Going back to the replay, Josh says challenge rule isn't much different. You just call a timeout instead of throwing a red flag. Get the timeout back if it's a good challenge and another challenge. I'd like to see 2 challenges be a staple, though. And but again, it's also like in addition to, you can call a timeout and ask them to look, but at the same time, every single play is up for review in a college football game because the booth can still review any play they want. The difference in the NFL is you have an actual coach's challenge system. You throw your red flag. We went through it, with the timeouts, you lose one, whatever. But not every play is up for review in the NFL. Right now in college, every play is up for review. And that's what I'm saying. Take that away and just go to a more standard coach's challenge system like the NFL has. It's really not that hard. It shouldn't be anyway. But
and that's I guess that's the overall that's the overall frustration about everything is college seems to make things way harder when there's a literal blueprint out there for how the NFL does it, and it's much more effective. The games are smoother. It seems as if there's less controversial calls. Like, don't get me wrong, no system is going to be absolutely perfect. Like, there's still times in the NFL where we're like, oh, are you sure? But I feel like it's way less often as compared, to college. It seems like college just it seems like a lot of the big plays are often not successfully called or handled or treated properly, I guess is the best way to put it.
Chi-Town says if the NCAA really cares about player safety, get rid of the regular season overtime and make postseason overtime sudden death. So then you're going to have
well, then there's going to be too many ties there could be ties that could influence the playoffs, I think is what would ultimately be the downside to that.
Well, the crazy thing is they changed this overtime system a couple of years ago to this whole, now you're, going from extra point distance and all that kind of stuff. And supposedly it was about cutting down on plays and player safety, but now you've got 6 and 7 overtime games as a result. And I definitely don't want to go back to we've got ties in the regular season. I don't want that, but I also don't like the current system that they're playing with. And, if you went to sudden death, then that means you've got the argument that we, had in the playoffs that they've tweaked the overtime rules in the playoffs. You go to sudden death, then that means that conceivably one team's not going to have the ball. And then you're going to get a big uproar, especially, in the post, because he's saying do sudden death in the postseason. Sudden death always sounded fun growing up. It's sudden death overtime, in my pet Summerall. Like it sounded cool to say sudden death, but at the same time, that means that, first team to score is going to be the winner. And that, what that used to mean in the NFL is all you had to do is go down and kick a field goal. There was no guarantee that the other team was ever going to touch the ball. And we've seen plenty of that. We've saw plenty of it in the playoffs over the last few years where one team didn't get to touch the ball and there was so much of an uproar, they finally changed the rules. So I especially wouldn't want to do that, like in college football playoff games where you're going to deny one team potentially the chance to possess the ball. Like I said, sudden death sounds cool, but you want to make sure, especially, if you're a Notre Dame fan, which, 99% of our audience obviously is Notre Dame fans. If Notre Dame's in the playoff and they lose a sudden death game because they didn't get to touch the ball, I guarantee you the next day or in the post-game show, everyone's going to be complaining about the overtime rule. Is there anyone who's not going to be complaining about it?
Yeah, the overtime rule is such a tricky tricky topic, and I will never be in favor of sudden death rules. I actually wish that the NFL would go to more of a system like college, but I will say the rule amendment I would make, and if you don't like it, that's whatever. In regular season, I feel as if each team, essentially, you should go through 3 rounds of overtime. There would be no going for 2. You can go for 2 if you want to. You can score a touchdown, kick a field goal, but after 3 overtimes, you would start essentially what I would call a field goal kicking off. And then from there, you would start at the 35-yard line. Each kicker's got to make one from the 35, and then you go to the 40, then you go to the 45.
You start back up in 5-yard increments.
You back up 5 yards, and whoever misses first ends up losing. I think that's the quickest way. You still get 3 overtimes to decide.
The quickest way isn't the best way. Do you want to put everything on your kicker with that much on the line?
I do, because I think that, again, special teams is a third of the game. And I do think that if we're going to keep around, the aspect of kicking, I think that you can put that kind of leverage on your kicker. I think it puts
kickers get scholarships too.
That's what I mean. Kickers are good. Yeah. It's a part of having a good team. I mean, look at Ohio State. If they have a good field goal kicker, they beat, they win that playoff game. I think that it's a part of having a good team. You got to have a field goal kicker to win you some games in crunch time. And if you've already gone through 3 overtimes and you've let it come down to a kickoff, well, that's your own problem. So I think that it is something that would be fun. And it would get the games, we wouldn't have to sit through, all these 6 overtimes and 2-point conversions and keeping track of, this and that. You get 3 overtimes. And then after that, you start a kicking competition.
Yeah. Ty is bringing a lot of, I like the fact that you're involved. You're bringing a lot of fresh ideas here, Ty. The soccer stuff, no, I'm sorry. I'm not going to soccer rules for football. Just back me out on that one. I'm not going to soccer rules for overtime. The closest, I don't have a problem with what you're saying about the field goals. The more I think about it, because again, you're giving the kicker a scholarship. He's on scholarship just like the defensive end and the quarterback and the running back and whoever it happens to be. So put it on him. That's what he's there for. Make kicks in crunch time. Going back to the instant replay, Josh is asking, so you're saying limit what can be challenged? Yes, because right now in college football, conceivably every single play of every game can go to review by the instant replay booth. And I'm saying do away with that and put it all on the coaches, just like the NFL. All on the coaches for the majority of the game. The only difference being, the only exception is the last 2 minutes of the game, when at that point everything goes to the booth. And then, like you're saying, change of possession, scoring plays, and what was the other one? Possession?
Scoring, first downs, and change of possession.
First downs. Yeah. Like those can go to the booth, and then the final 2 minutes. Otherwise, just coaches challenge system. You shouldn't be sitting there. Everyone's going up to the line of scrimmage. The coach isn't even wanting to challenge something, but all of a sudden, the replay booth wants to look at, was the guy's knee down. The coach should be responsible for having to challenge that. They are in the NFL, and like you said, Jess, if you want to add a challenge, make it 3 in college or even 4, as opposed to the 2 that coaches get in the NFL. But you can earn a 3rd in the NFL, I think, if you win the first 2. But put it all on the coaches. Make it an actual challenge system. Stop making every single play reviewable in college football.
Yeah, because then at any point a coach can just say, hey, I want to stop and review this, and then they essentially can get a free timeout out of it, right? And it could be a very crucial moment. And you could, as a coach, honestly, I would use it as, even if I think it's close or not, again, if you want to stop momentum or get a breather real quick, you can always just say, hey, we want to challenge this play.
Josh is saying, well, they can't challenge penalties. I'm not saying they can. I'm just saying, what can be challenged in college. There's too much that's up for review. They need to do away with that. Tyler, eliminate the back-to-back timeout. That is another thing that is coming to college football this year. They are eliminating back-to-back timeouts being called. So that'll be a little bit different. So something else to get ready for. What do you think about down by contact in college? Like currently in college, if the quarterback, if a player slips, he's got the ball, he's down where his knee comes down. Should they have to be down by contact? Should they have to be touched by a defender like you have in the NFL to actually be down? Should they be able to get back up if they're not touched?
Yeah, this is another stupid rule in my opinion. I have no reason or I have no idea why this is a rule in college but not the NFL, because there are so many circumstances where uh falling down isn't really controllable by the player. It has more to do with the playing condition of the field. Like if you're playing on a crappy field and you're cutting and you cut so hard that you fall down, but you're in open space, like how should you be penalized for that, right? Like nothing made you fall except the natural kind of, I guess, resources around you. So yeah, I've always found that one stupid. There's if no one touches you and you go down on your by yourself, then you should just be able to get back up, right? Like no one did anything to tackle you. No one, there's no contact, there's no forcible action. And so if you slip and fall or you make a cut and you slip and fall or, whatever it might be, you should be able to get right back up and keep going.
I completely agree. I mean, it's big boy Division I football. There's no reason they shouldn't. You want to keep, the current rule like it is in high school. That's fine. But by the time you get to college, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to get back up after you slip. I have no idea why they've stuck with it this way, other than, well, that's the way we've always done it. And it's kind of basically the way it is. I agree with everything that you just said. That's why I brought it up. And I think that, I think that that's the way I would go. I don't understand exactly why they still do it that way. What about 2 feet down, though? Like I still think 1 foot down in college football is good as opposed to 2 feet down in the NFL. What do you think?
So I also agree with that one, because to me that's a leap that you make from going like amateur to professional, and there's two factors to that. As a wide receiver, you have to make the jump from amateur to professional, but in college you still have a college quarterback throwing to it, so it's just not going to be quite as accurate as and precise. So those ones that you really have to go up and reach for because of maybe a bad pass on some of them, I don't think that you should be penalized for that. But when you get to the NFL, we're all pros at this point. We're pro quarterbacks, we're pro wide receivers. Like those throws are on the money, and in order for it to be a catch, I do like the idea of having to have 2 feet down.
Completely agree. Completely agree with that.
What do you? I want to ask you one. What do you
Okay.
think of preseason rankings? I'll tell you kind of what my format would be, and then we can maybe go from there. But I think that there should be a preseason rankings, maybe like an idea of your top 25, and that never gets released. I think the coaches and AP can do their polls, and then after 4 weeks, a third of the season, I
You
think
just stop.
you do another set of rankings, and then you do kind of a compare and contrast of where they were beginning of the season and where they were 4 weeks in, and then you kind of come up with the final ranking after that. But I think rankings shouldn't be released until the first month of the season is completely over.
See, like DT is saying 0 preseason rankings, and that's kind of what you're saying as well. I don't have a problem with it because it gives us something to talk about going into the
Yeah,
season.
but then I
And
just feel like a lot of teams get hyped up, and the only reason preseason rankings happen is so that the first couple weeks of the season, big quote unquote big games can have 10 versus 5, and it'll draw a much bigger crowd. But realistically, those two teams probably aren't a 10 or a 5. And to me, it's the only reason that they do these is to hype up more of the matchups.
that's probably true. But at the same time, like, do they really matter that much? And maybe that's kind of part of your argument that they don't matter that. I mean, look at TCU. TCU is not a top 10 team going into last season. Cincinnati was not top 10, the season before that, but both of them ended up in the college football playoff because as they won, they worked their way up the rankings and they ended up, where they should have been. Now, granted, 95% or even more of where you are heading into a season is based on what you did the season before. And, you can also argue that a lot of people who are doing the voting aren't actually paying, that much close enough attention, to what's actually going on with the team. So you're saying you wait 4 weeks until you put out your first rankings. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that you can put together, like your rough draft of where you think teams are going to stand. But I don't think that should be released to the public. And I just think that after 4 weeks, you have a better understanding of who is who, like I just don't think that with the current system, it's just all a guess. Like we could very easily go out there and say what we think our top, list is, but maybe that's the whole point. Maybe it's, it is just everyone's best guess. And then you kind of just have to work its way out, once the season starts. But I just think it gives a lot of these teams, false. And that's the main thing, is it gives a lot of fans and fan bases false expectations and realities of maybe where their season stands based off of these preseason polls. And then you get 4 games in and your team is 2-2 when you were supposed to be the number 15 team in the country, 10 team in the country. And so then it's just like, I don't know. I just think it creates a lot of it can create a lot of false expectations and hope. And maybe that's just the sport in general. But I don't know. Nothing really good comes from the preseason rankings, in my opinion.
Most of the early part of the schedule, anyway, like look at what Notre Dame's playing right off the bat: Navy, Tennessee State, Central Michigan. Like, what more are you going to find out about? Like, so if they obliterate those teams, well, they should obliterate those teams. If they struggle at all, it's just an excuse to have them down around 15th, right? Like, I don't know. I've got no problems with the polls because I think in the end, it all goes out in the wash. It ends up where it's supposed to be eventually anyway. You earn your way on. You keep winning, you end up where you're supposed to be most of the time. You start losing some games, that's when it changes. But just winning, it takes care of itself, I think, more times than not. What about, and I just saw this one pop up, and I saw like Ty is saying allow preseason scrimmages, and another one that I saw is if you're going to play FCS opponents, put those at the start of your season, and that's your scrimmage. So you can play an FCS, but that's a scrimmage instead of an actual game. What do you think of those possibilities?
So the scrimmage is going to get into a lot of kind of, what we saw recently in the newest NFL contract between the NFL and the NFLPA and the amount of preseason games and etc. I just think it becomes a liability and extra mileage on the body for some players. So I'm okay with scrimmages, but I think that they should be more of a 7-on-7 format. I don't know that I want full on,
contact, risk of injury type stuff.
Risk of injury. Like, who's to say if you're Alabama and you're playing an FCS team, the last thing you want in a scrimmage is for a guy to go down with the season-ending injury because you're going full-blown, full contact. So I'm okay with scrimmages, but it would be more of like a controlled scrimmage, right? Like 7-on-7, maybe wrap up, no full thud, no full taken down to the ground, that kind of stuff. That would be, I guess, if you wanted to do scrimmages, that's kind of how I would look at it.
Yeah, I think most coaches would kind of like the opportunity to have a preseason scrimmage rather than go into a season cold, especially depending on who you're playing. But I get what you're saying about the injury. You are risking more body shots, and essentially if you're going to make them exhibitions as opposed to a real game, then I think coaches are going to want to minimize any risk that they have. And in that case, they're just going to say, well, get rid of it now. So I think that makes sense. Just keep it with what they are. Give everybody a few cream puffs. We can't even criticize it anymore after early September rolls around and they play Tennessee State. We used to be able to, we still can say right now, Notre Dame's never played an FCS opponent, but that's going to change here pretty soon. So
yeah, it's still a sore subject for me. I think that I understand the rationale behind it, but I still I'm not on board with it, you know?
I agree.
Like, I understand what Marcus Freeman's trying to do and what he's trying to promote, but I still think that you can do those things without playing an FCS team. I think that's something that Notre Dame has prided themselves obviously on for a very long time. And if you're going to not be in a conference and have the possibility for a conference championship, then you can't take away from one of those 12 data points by playing an FCS team. Because to me, the counter argument is, you know, for all the like the Alabamas and the Michigans that make, you know, their conference championships, well, a lot of those teams do play an FCS team, right? Or maybe a Division I AA or you know, something along those lines. So it's like those kind of negate each other, right? Because that conference championship is basically your 12th data point because you did play an FCS team. Well, if Notre Dame plays an FCS team, their 12 data point goes down to an 11 data point. So now you're no longer equal. That argument is no longer valid, right? Because you're saying, well, you guys, yes, you play a conference championship, but one of those games is an FCS team. We've played, you know, predominantly all Division I opponents. So the 12 equals 12 at the end of the day.
I'm going to save my comments for our first topic of rapid fire. I think it kind of ties in a little bit. So with that, I'm ready to talk some Notre Dame football. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Man, we got going on all these rule changes, and it still feels like we could, you know, go on for another 30 minutes. But
I know.
I'm always ready for the rapid fire segue.
All right, let's do it. So during his New York media blitz last week, Marcus Freeman told the NFL Network that he and his family took a red-eye flight back from Hawaii to South Bend, and he used it to get a feel for what he and his team will go through when the Irish go to Ireland to open the season. So how much do you think this is actually going to help, Jess?
So this is a tricky one because Marcus Freeman isn't a player, right? Like at the end of the day, he's still going through the same schedule as the players, but his body isn't being taxed quite like the players. So I think that in order to make an apple to apple comparison, it's a little hard. But what I will say is I respect Marcus Freeman for going out of his way to get some sort of feel on the situation in general, even if it's not going to be the exact same because of what I was just saying, like the players aren't, you know, the players are actually playing a game. That's much more physically demanding than what it means to be a coach. And then experiencing, you know, that basically change of time zone when you're traveling. It's going to hit the players a little bit harder. What I'm saying is I respect Marcus Freeman as a head coach because I don't think most head coaches would still try to grasp what that feels like in general. So I think that it is beneficial because Marcus Freeman will have some sort of idea what kind of impact it has. My thing is what kind of impact, how much is that impact amplified to the players? Because again, they're the ones actually playing in a very grueling and physical matchup. And we're talking, you know, against Navy, which is one of the more physical matchups as is already, you know, defending the triple option, etc. So I think it's great Marcus Freeman did it, and I think it allows him to have some sort of grasp of the situation. I just don't think he'll have a full grasp of it because he's not a player himself.
Well, like one of the things that, you know, for one, there's a 6-hour time difference between Eastern time, where South Bend is, and Hawaii. There's a 5-hour time difference between Eastern time and Ireland. So you've got, you know, 1 hour difference there. You've got about the same, you know, because you're going to be doing the same thing. Going from Hawaii to South Bend is similar from a time difference from going to South Bend to Ireland. So you've got a lot of similarity there. And like one of the things that he talked about was, you know, it's like, hey, get up the next day. And the way his body felt, it's like, okay, when we get there, I don't think we probably need to do a full practice that first day as much as, okay, we go through a walkthrough as we're getting acclimated a little bit and do some things a little bit different. And so from that aspect, I think it's great because again, you're talking about a very similar time difference, you know, Hawaii to South Bend to Ireland. So I think that it's great that he was able to experience that as someone who's a little bit older and can kind of feel that because, you know, one of the things he talked about in the NFL, like every couple of years, one of these NFL teams is going to Europe, and you've got even more of them going to Europe now with the games in Germany. And obviously you've got the London games and all that, you know, it's like going on all the time. Those teams are always doing that. So like he said that he's kind of picked some of their brains a little bit as well to kind of talk about how they've done things. And going back to what we were talking about with the Tennessee game, part of the rationalization in this whole thing is, okay, it's like, okay, you're playing Navy in Ireland to open up the season. You're not going to put a bye week coming back, right afterwards. Instead, you're going to play an FCS team, so it like, it's a bye week, but it's not a bye week. And instead, you're going to have 2 bye weeks in the last month of the season later on. So, maybe it's a little bit of a roll of a dice, but that's part of the trade-off for what Notre Dame is doing by adding that FCS team, which I still really don't care for. But the fact that they've chosen to lay their schedule out this way, that's kind of the way it's going to go.
Yeah. And yeah, I just kind of have to agree with that, because you're essentially giving yourself I don't want to like bite my tongue later, because you never know. Like, what if Notre Dame pulls a Michigan and loses to Appalachian State, right? But like, it's basically like a half bye week by scheduling the FCS opponent at that point in the season, because you have a long layover. You know that the prep shouldn't be as strenuous, shouldn't be as hard. But again, like, you just never know. And so you don't want, and that's what I hate, is you're already creating a mindset as is, that this Tennessee State game
right
isn't as serious as what it could be. And that's when catastrophic things happen, aka
Yes.
Michigan and Appalachian State.
Yeah, and a close call against Ball State a few years back. That's exactly right. James asking why Sam Hartman had his rib removed. I'm sure you've probably maybe seen that story over the last few days after the media blitz last week. So I guess when Sam Hartman, when he was at Wake Forest last year, he had that blood clotting disorder, and it sidelined him at the start of the season. And what they did was removed some of his rib, like upper rib cage, I believe, like up near his collarbone, so that it helped with his blood circulation to cut down on the clotting, apparently. So they removed part of this rib, and what he is now somewhat, famously, infamously, however you want to look at it, he's given it to his mom, and he wants the rib turned into a necklace. So, but that's why he had the rib removed, because it was because of this blood clotting disorder. It is up here near the collarbone someplace, and it is supposed to help the circulation of his blood to cut down on the clotting. So that's apparently why he did it. Very interesting. Would you ever have your rib turned into a necklace?
I think about it, but I don't know if I could actually go through with it. I understand the concept of it, right? Like I think that kind of maybe fits, who Sam Hartman is a little bit, but it's a little weird at the same time for me.
It is. It's a little strange. So Brian Kelly was asked at SEC Media Days if he's closing the gap with Georgia since he's been at LSU. His answer, no, it's not. The gap is not closed. So let me ask you this, Jesse. Has Notre Dame's gap closed since Marcus Freeman has been head coach? Has the gap closed with the Georgias and Alabamas of the world?
So that's a tough question, because if you look at record, you would look at 8-4, right? And you would say, no, that gap did not close. But the flip side of it for me would be Notre Dame, even though that they went 8-4 last year, since Marcus Freeman has been head coach and leading up to Marcus Freeman being a head coach, they are drastically changing the type of player that they're getting on the field. And I think that they are also drastically changing the relationship between head coach and player and what that dynamic and respect looks like on both sides. Because I think players love and respect Marcus Freeman more than they loved and respected Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly basically just said, here's how it's going to be. You're going to listen to me. And if you don't like it, well, that's going to be basically the end of that, right? Like it's just tough cookie at that point. But I think there is more of a dialogue between Marcus Freeman and his players, and a clear expectation of what the standards are going to be. And Marcus Freeman is going to do everything in his power to help you get, to where they need you to be on the team. And so when you take those things into consideration, again, the recruiting, the level of talent on the field, the players, etc., I think that the gap has closed in those regards, but we haven't quite seen it yet in terms of record. But I don't think that Marcus Freeman should be held to the hook as what his record was being a first-time head coach at the University of Notre Dame. So I will say that the gap has closed. I don't know if it's closed drastically, but I do think that they've made steps towards making that gap close.
Yes, I agree with that. You took a long way to get there to the end, but I agree with what you're saying. I agree as well that the gap has at least incrementally closed, but just as you lay it out, 8-4, you haven't seen it on the field, with the exception of they did beat a team that's won a couple national championships in the last few years in Clemson last year. But in terms of the Alabamas and Georgias of the world, look, like for Brian Kelly, it's the same topic, right? It's like new address, same topic. Like he used to get asked all the time about closing the gap when he was here at Notre Dame. And of course, he threw it right back at the media. No one was supposed to ask him about that. He got ticked off about it. And now he's down at LSU and he's getting gap closing questions, and I think that's just kind of what it is. But he's also doing his Brian Kelly thing. He's keeping expectations as low as possible and, trying to go from there so that everything looks like a big accomplishment if he's able to get there. To what you were saying, like I agree with everything that you're saying, relationship wise that Marcus Freeman is doing. We've talked before about, look, Notre Dame might not be quite yet getting the 5-star elite players yet, but Marcus Freeman's blue chip ratio, the percentage of 4- and 5-star guys that he has been recruiting so far and getting commitments from and signed obviously last year, compared to Brian Kelly's, Marcus Freeman's blue chip ratio is 20% higher than what Brian Kelly was doing. So while, it might only be incrementally, but I think that, they're like the gap is starting to close. It's where Marcus Freeman can keep it going. Can he keep it going? Can he continue to up the ante with the kind of quarterback recruits that he's bringing in? Because I think that that's where you can offset a lot if you start getting bigger hits with the quarterbacks like they're getting. And, they're already doing a good job of that. Get a bigger hit with the quarterbacks, then you're gonna, not just inch it, you're gonna gain a few yards on them. But so I think they're starting to, but there is still a ways to go to truly get there, to catch up with those schools.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, just to add one more thing that I left
Sure.
out. I think another major difference between Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman is Marcus Freeman owns his mistakes and lives up to his mistakes and is accountable for his mistakes. And I don't think
Brian Kelly throws them back at everybody else.
That was exactly what I was getting ready to say. Brian Kelly he deflects everything that goes wrong onto everyone else until it was time for something to go right. Then he wanted to be the guy to kind of take all the credit. I think when things are going great or things are going horrible, Marcus Freeman, it goes through Marcus Freeman first, and he would never throw any of his players under the bus. It is always, well, I need to do this, or I need to change that, or I need to do this, and then relay that onto the players so they can execute it. So that's another big one, in my opinion. And I think that, I don't know how much that it actually closes the gap, but I think that's going to help you close the gap quicker because you have a coach that, again, and to me, it goes back to players. They're going to want to play for someone more so and give more hard work and effort for someone that they know is going to have their back at the end of the day.
Right. So we talked about some rule changes up front. One thing that I've seen tossed out, the idea of Power 5 relegation. The bottom teams, in the Power, where, like if you're at the bottom of a Power 5 conference, you drop down a level. If you're at the, top of a lower conference, you would get to pop up, like say it was Cincinnati a couple years back. Like Cincinnati could have potentially traded places with a team like Kansas or Vanderbilt, like bottom feeder type teams in their conferences for the season that the Bearcats have. What do you think about the concept of Power 5 relegation?
I'm going to go out and say, while the idea sounds cool, I just think there's too many logistics and too many overall teams to make it happen, because you see relegation happen primarily in like soccer, but the pool of teams is much smaller, right? And so I like it. To me, it's like you can't really relegate to a different conference, because I think there's too many logistical issues. Like, what if a team is really bad at football but really good at basketball? Like, are you only relegating per sport? So like maybe you have a team that's, not in a Power 5 conference for football, but is in a Power 5 conference for basketball. So the only way that I think that you could accomplish this is if you had like a top and bottom tier within the same like conference. Like if the ACC had like a ACC,
like a top conference, like
a top and bottom tier, and maybe you get relegated to those based off of, performance and everything.
And as big as the conferences are getting, you could easily do that. You could have, like the upper division and the lower division, basically.
Yeah. And so I don't think that you could cross, conference lines because of what I was talking about. Like there's just too much disparity between every sport. But I do think that if you did it, like you could still do it per sport, because you could, again, have a top and bottom tier, per sport, and then you get relegated to that. And maybe it's like, the top two-thirds of teams are the teams that stay in the top tier, and the bottom 1/3 are the teams that are in the bottom tier. I think that's the only way that you could go about it.
Yeah, like if college football ever goes to this system that a lot of people have talked about, where, like the Power 5 break off, or you've got one body that's overseeing all of, you just have to separate football from the rest of the sports, I think, if you're going to do this, because there's just too many moving parts when you start throwing in all the other sports, because you would essentially be moving from one conference to another, where, what you said there, were like, with all these super conferences, obviously the SEC and the Big Ten being the poster children for that, you could make an upper division and a lower division. But then you're also going to start talking about your lower division teams are probably going to be bringing in less revenue every year. And then you're going to make some people mad, and you're going to have, Texas leaving the Big 12 after, the rest of the anchor teams of the Big 8, even in Big 12 have left. So I think it's a little bit much if you had one oversight, if it was just football and you had football under one, kind of blanket organization. I think it could potentially work, but I think there's probably a reason that you only see relegation overseas in those other sports, even though people want to compare soccer to American football. I think it's just different. I don't think that it would work over here, especially in college, again, because there's so many different sports involved. It's not just football, and you're talking about schools and conferences and everything else. Fill in the blank. It's blank that the SEC announced it will hold its football media days in Dallas next year, which coincides with Texas and Oklahoma's move to the conference.
It is a big marketing move that the SEC announced that their media day is going to be in Dallas, Texas. Which again is coincidentally that the same time that Texas and Oklahoma are going to be joining the SEC. And I saw some backlash on this, basically saying that the SEC already decided that it was going to be rotating between cities coming up, and that it's not just but come on, the year that Texas, one of the biggest states in the country, and Dallas being one of the biggest markets in the country as well. And you're telling me that that's completely coincidental? There's no fooling me, my friend. They did that on purpose, right? Like you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Right. And again, it's a huge promotional marketing, whatever you want to call it. And it just looks good on behalf of the SEC. So I've heard that, it's going to be in Nashville, in upcoming years, and, here and there. But okay, that's all fine if the SEC has, this list of cities that they're going to start rotating between. But the fact that it's in Dallas, the year that those two teams are joining, there's no coincidence for me. You know,
No
that's
coincidence.
very much a strategic move on, you know, I'm part of the SEC, the NCAA, everyone involved. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, from the minute the Big Ten or the Big Ten, from the minute Texas joined the Big 12, you know, they had a way of making everyone around them mad. And they had a way of, you know, because basically it was always about Texas. You know, they got their Longhorn network. It ticked everybody off. You know, again, it sent Nebraska, Missouri, Colorado to other conferences, 3 different conferences, as a matter of fact. And it splintered all the jealousies, and they started moving events that used to, Big Eight events, out of Kansas City and down to Dallas. Most of them ended up back in Kansas City because it's like, oh, it just makes more sense up here. There's a good infrastructure here. But there was just a lot of that. And you can't tell me it's coincidence that the first year, the SEC had no reason to go to Dallas before
That's what I've
Texas and Oklahoma
always
were
been
there.
in one spot from my
Yeah,
understanding.
it's out of the SEC footprint, until next year when Oklahoma and Texas join. And even though Oklahoma's obviously Oklahoma, it's not that far south of the north of the Metroplex down there. So you can't tell me it's just coincidence that it's happening. And Texas already getting its burnt orange flex on, joining the SEC next year. So this is going to be the final season for Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12. And of course, you've got USC and UCLA in the Pac 12, set to join the Big 10 next year. When you look at the value of schools joining new conferences, do you think that market size or the brand of the school is more important?
To me, this is made, and hopefully I don't offend anyone. This is an easy answer for me because without the brand, there's no market, right? Like if USC isn't who they are, they don't establish the market because their brand hasn't traveled across. Like they haven't established a successful program and a program of, of winning essentially. So I think that you have to establish yourself as the school first, create the brand, and because of what you've created as a brand, you've created the market because more people want to watch you, right? Like more people want to, they're enthralled by, good football, good baseball, good basketball, whatever it might be. In this case, obviously football is the driving decision for mainly everything. If you don't have a good football program and you don't have sustained success and, you haven't made it to playoffs, you haven't won national championships, etc., well, then there's no real market because who's going to be a fan of you? No one really supports a team that's just downright, bad every year. So to me, the market is set by the brand, and that's kind of where I'm going to leave that at.
Yeah, Chi-Town asks if we're talking about prestige or money because that's 2 different answers. Well, I get what you're saying there, but the point is Notre Dame is arguably the biggest brand in all of college sports, and it's in South Bend, Indiana. It is not in a major market. Whereas, like, especially when we start talking about, what's all this conference realignment about? It's not about prestige. It's about the money that schools are able to generate. And look at Texas and Oklahoma. They're not in major markets. Look at Alabama, Tuscaloosa. Look at Georgia, Athens. Like USC is a little bit of an outlier because they happen to be in Los Angeles. Now, USC and UCLA leaving for the Big Ten is a big deal because it leaves the second biggest media market in the country. Like that really hurts the Pac-12 in terms of their media negotiation. But for the rest of college football, or college sports, college football being the bus driver, it is predominantly about the brand that generates the revenue as opposed to the market that the brand comes from. In professional sports, it is predominantly about the market size because the market size that you are in it sets the value that you are able to generate from your media contract. But in college sports, it is much more about the brand than it is the market, because again, like Alabama, Notre Dame, Texas, go on down the list. Again, Georgia, Clemson, as long as they're a big commodity. Florida State, when they're good. Tallahassee is obviously not a big market. It is much more about the brand and what you can do with that brand, what that brand means to what you're adding it to, that is going to be the one that generates the revenue, not the market size. That's kind of my point. Brent Venables took a shot at Deion Sanders at Big 12 Media Days. Quote, "I was unlike Deion. I gave guys 12 months of grace to figure it out," end quote. Of course, he's talking about how Deion Sanders, ran off so much of the Colorado Buffaloes when he took over. So are Venables' comments fair or foul?
This is another easy one for me. I think his comments are completely foul. I honestly don't think he has any grounds to make those sort of comments, because I am under the big impression, and I go through this a lot. And granted, my stakes aren't nearly as high. I coach 7 to 9 year olds in baseball. But the thing that irritates me the most is when another coach tries to tell me how to coach my team. And I think that that's just a line, no matter what sport you're in, what age group you're in, you're the coach of that team. You make the decisions. You were hired by people who trusted you to make those decisions. And so I just don't think he has any legs to stand on, essentially. And I think another point to further validate my argument is it's not Brent Venables' head coaching career. It's Deion Sanders' head coaching career. He's in the driver's seat for how he wants to, essentially build a successful roster. It's not Brent Venables' record at Colorado that's impacted by what players he does and doesn't keep. It's Deion Sanders. And so I think that Deion Sanders can do what he wants to do because he's the one that has to go through the repercussions or the benefits of it or the criticism or the praise for it. It's no one else. So I just think it's completely foul.
Yeah, I agree. John Kristofik is on the other side. He says it's fair. And, again, like Deion Sanders is polarizing, but I think it's funny. And I agree that it's foul, but it's funny because Oklahoma hadn't had a losing season since 1998 before Brent Venables took over and led them to a thud of a 6-7 record last year. So they had their first losing season, and that's after going 11-2 the year before. Brent Venables inherited a program that had gone to New Year's Six Bowls in 5 of the 6 previous seasons. And again, they won 11 games the year before he took over. Lincoln Riley left the cupboard. He took some guys with him, obviously Caleb Williams being the most notable, and they also lost Spencer Rattler, but there was still a pretty good roster intact at Oklahoma. And Brent Venables goes 6-7 after a team had won 11 games the year before and gone to a New Year's Six Bowl. Colorado hasn't been to a New Year's Six Bowl in more than 20 years. They went 1-11 last year. So there's a pretty big disparity in the kind of rosters that Brent Venables inherited at Oklahoma last year and the one that Deion Sanders inherited at Colorado this year. So, there was a lot more work, for Deion.
Right, like Colorado was in the dumper and Oklahoma was riding. It's probably some of the best highs that it's had.
There was no reason for Brent Venables. Like Brent Venables had, a security blanket, basically. Like he didn't have to run it. He's like, I gave him 12 months grace period. Well, it's easier to give 12 months grace period when you take over the kind of roster you took over compared to the one that Deion took over. Now, again, you can say, was it a little bit extreme or even, a lot extreme the way Deion did it? Of course, you can make that case, but Brent Venables didn't need an overhaul. Deion Sanders needed an overhaul, and he performed his overhaul within, the parameters of the system he was given.
Deion Sanders wasn't told to come in and have another losing season. He was asked to come and do what he needs to do to change things around, and that's what he deemed necessary to turn things around. He knows what good players look like. He's a good player himself. He's coached good players. He knows it with that roster, with the set of players he has, whether or not he can turn it around. And he made the decision that I can't turn it around with this group of players. I need, more talent. So I mean, again, did he go about it in the best way? Probably not. But I mean, I would have probably done the same thing myself. Obviously, if a team's going 0-12, 1-11, whatever it was Colorado was doing, they don't have the players suited to win. And Deion Sanders is getting the players to turn that around.
Yeah. All right, last question tonight. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Richard Sherman is reportedly a candidate to join Skip Bayless on his FS1 debate show, Undisputed.
It is kind of surprising that Richard Sherman is a candidate because I think this show has a formula for what they think generates the most popularity and viewership, etc. And that's getting someone that is very contradictory and argumentative of Skip Bayless. So that fits the mold to me. But Skip Bayless has proven that can only last for so long, and then he drives that person out. And I think Richard Sherman is a lot less patient and I guess maybe strong, opinionated, that I think they're going to clash heads even quicker, and it would lead to quicker disputes. And essentially what we saw with Shannon Sharpe, it would just be escalated at a more rapid pace. So again, I know that they're trying to, fit into this formula that they've seen have success before, but Richard Sherman is again, is not as calm and won't be as calm as Shannon Sharpe was for as long as he was.
I mean, he seems just as strong-willed and overly opinionated, if not more so, than Bayless himself. And like you said, like Bayless obviously went his way, and it's like the list is very, like, apparently they've had a hard time even getting to Richard Sherman on this list, of like people that they've talked to. Nobody wants to work with the guy, so I'm sure if they throw a big bucket of money at Richard Sherman, who's obviously already doing some work in TV. And again, it's like, this is a guy who, is like hyper opinionated himself. I think I don't know. It might be entertaining for a while, but like you said, the staying power, I have a hard time seeing.
Yeah, and someone said it's kind of comical. It is kind of comical, and nothing against Richard Sherman, but if that's how far down the list you have to go of people with experience, because Richard Sherman doesn't have a ton of experience, I think it shows that no one wants to work with Skip Bayless, right? Like, who would want to work with Skip Bayless?
Yeah, and that's kind of where you are. And like you look at, since Stephen A. and Bayless have gone their separate ways. Now, Stephen A. has obviously gone through some different hosts as well, but like he's at a place now with kind of the way it is. There's at least, it seems like, a working mutual respect that he has for the people who are on his show that has not been the same. When you look at how Skip Bayless has done his business on his show. So I have a hard time seeing it work in the long haul. Maybe they just need to do what Stephen A. did for what, like just bring in a rotating cast, so you don't have to have the same person sitting there every day, so you don't wear each other out, like when it was him and Shannon Sharpe.
I'm still curious to see where Shannon Sharpe ends up.
I know we haven't heard anything on that yet, but there've been some rumble. Like I've heard like some different, maybe on an NFL, show or something like that. I would think that he'll be someplace this season by the time it's all said and done.
No, I do too.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up with that. Appreciate you joining us here tonight. As always, if you would hit that like button on your way out. And of course, subscribe, rate, and review on your podcast platforms. And we will talk to you tomorrow once again on IB Nation Sports Talk.